Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending today's webinar. We'll give it just a minute or so for some other people to join. Again, thank you for joining today. The webinar is titled Achieve Continuous Compliance to NIST Cyber Security Framework. And Chandra Basavana will be providing a presentation discussing the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and how to achieve continuous compliance. I'm Greg Potabom. I head up our SecPod partner program. Chandra is the CEO of SecPod. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll answer all the questions. Please feel free to go ahead and type those in during the webinar if you like, and then we'll address those towards the end. It looks like we have a pretty good audience. Looks like most people are here. So I think we should go ahead and start with the presentation today. Chandra?
Hey, Greg. Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar today. I know it is somewhat of an early morning for some. We'll get through it, keep it as simple as possible. So the topic is achieving continuous compliance to NIST Cybersecurity Framework. I will talk this in two parts. First part, we will do a quick overview on NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF in short. What is it about, and what is the problem space or the area that it is focusing on? So the NIST CSF framework is a pretty hefty document, so I'll try and give a quick overview on that in the first part. And in the second part, we will talk about how to achieve this continuous compliance to this particular framework and what we have to do to get there. So we all have to adhere to one or the other cybersecurity guideline. There are a number of them: COBIT, FedRAMP, PCI, HIPAA, ISA, ISO 27001, etc., and more recently GDPR, etc. NIST itself has come up with a good number of guidelines in 853 series. For every technology that you can think of, there are guidelines available on how to secure those. So NIST 853 in particular is for the federal agencies to achieve certain level of compliance as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And a simplified version of that was released in the form of 800-171, which is also meant for the partners who work with the federal agencies. And it's also being used by the private organizations, the NIST 800-171. So the NIST CSF was first released in the year 2014. The current version is 1.1, and 2018 April is when they came up with this framework. So as the name suggests, it is a framework encompassing some of the standard or the benchmark or the guidelines that have been there prior. So it kind of references that, so it does not reinvent the benchmark or the guidelines that are defined by others. So it is trying to define a general framework that would encompass the existing cybersecurity guidelines and trying to make it into a continuous, repeatable risk management or a risk assessment and management cycle or a process. So a quick overview on what CSF is all about. So it is a risk management and a cybersecurity framework. It has primarily 3 components. The first component is framework core, where list of activities that one would need to perform to achieve the level of resilience required to secure the assets. Now, in terms of the functions, it has 5 layers. It touches upon all the layers of a resilient cybersecurity framework. First is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So identify, as we know, is to know what kind of assets are we trying to safeguard, what is the risks that are present, and what kind of security algorithms, for example, have been implemented, etc. And then the protection layer is implementing the measures required to safeguard these IT environment, which can be an access control, for example, identity and access control, or having an endpoint protection platform to prevent against malicious attacks, for example. Then you have the detection layer. So this is meant to do a continuous monitoring of all the activities that are happening and see if there are certain anomalies, and then respond to those anomalies if they are found to be malicious, and then recover. So if an attack were to take place, how am I going to get my business back up and running from the business continuity point of view? So these are the 5 layers that the framework core talks about. So each of these layers have categories and subcategory. So the category would be access control and risk management and etc. the activities at the group level. Subcategory would be what would you do to perform that particular activity, much more specific or available as part of subcategory. So the interesting thing about cybersecurity framework is that the informative references that I mentioned here is nothing but referencing it to another standard or a guideline that our organization might already be using it. Maybe a PCI or a COBIT or ISA. So any of these standards that are already being implemented. So the informative references want to know in further detail what that specific category and subcategory actually means. And the other part is if I am already implementing a certain thing, so you can use those the reference numbers instead of documenting new. And then the second component is the framework implementation tiers. So there are 4 tiers essentially to measure where we stand against each category and subcategory. So if it is a risk management, for example, so all the activities, are you doing a vulnerability scanning? Do you know what assets are there? So these are all subcategories part of the risk management category. So tier 1 would mean partial and tier 4 would be adaptive. So the goal of an organization is to traverse from tier 1 to tier 4 to get better at that particular risk management goal or an outcome. And then you have framework profile, which is to define what is the outcome that I want to achieve for a particular category and subcategory, and being able to communicate that outcome to all the stakeholders within the organizations or partners, wherever that communication is required. So these are the 3 components. So essentially, if you look at it, it's not reinventing anything. It is referencing to an existing guideline. What it is essentially trying to do is, can I define my set of goals? Can I see where I am today and where I want to go, and document this and communicate it to the stakeholders, and then go on to achieve that particular goal and make it a repeatable process. So here are the steps or the activities one would do to implement a CSF program. So you prioritize the scope, which is to identify what are the categories and subcategories that I'm going to focus on, and orient the organization towards that particular category and subcategory. Orient would be identifying the assets which would be impacted by the change, and then creating a current profile, understanding where we are today and documenting where we are, and then doing an assessment, a risk assessment exercise, and then defining a target profile, which is an outcome or where we want to go. So once you know the current state and the outcome, and if we have done a risk assessment exercise, we definitely know the gaps that we want to address. So analyze the gaps and see how we can implement the issues or the deviations that are there. So prepare an implementation plan and make that happen, and then come back to the next set of categories and subcategories and make this a process, a continuous process or a repeatable process. So specifically, the Nist Csf Core talks about these 5 layers, as I mentioned earlier. Identifies, talking about asset management, risk management, the governance model, the risk mitigation strategy. Protection is defining access control, data security, and other protection based technologies. And the detection is to do a continuous monitoring and detect anomalies and events, and prepare a detection process and implement the process. And respond to an anomaly or an event, and then recover, which is disaster recovery. If an attack were to happen, how am I going to get back to bring back my operations up and running as quickly as possible? So these are the 5 layers that are defined in the CSF core. Each of these layers are the categories will have subcategories, as I mentioned. So thus, those subcategories are further getting into the details, like how would you do risk assessment, how would you implement a risk management practice, for example. So if you see the CSF framework, so is it different from anything that is already there? In fact, it uses or leverages the existing compliance guidelines. It just tells us or makes it a continuous process to go from one point to the next point, which is a goal-based process. And it also tells us how we can communicate across the organization. It is pretty comprehensive, but it also can be expressed in a common language, as we talked about earlier. So that is about a CSF quick overview. Now let's see how we can achieve a continuous compliance as described by the CSF framework. Now, this is where it becomes challenging. So one is the guidelines talking about all the activities that one would need to perform and also report against. So it also touches upon the 5 layers of a resilient cybersecurity framework. The implementation is where it becomes the rough patch, and becomes complicated. So if you look at the vendor scenario, so each vendor you talk to, the claim is that 90% or 90+% of coverage is available for CSF. But if you look at the information assets that you would like to protect and segment those, you have endpoints that you have to safeguard, which forms 80 to 90% of the organization's assets. Then you have the network devices and the network infrastructure as a whole that you would want to protect. Then you have applications and server instances running in the cloud, and there are specific corporate or enterprise applications that you would want to safeguard. And of course, the data itself, which needs to be safeguarded. So these are multiple layers of security that you will have to implement. So even if you were to take up a specific task of protecting the endpoint computing environment, the scenario is quite overwhelming. So the reason why I say it is overwhelming is because of this. So I identify at least about 15 different category of products that I will have to invest in order to achieve a certain level of compliance as defined by the CSF specific to the endpoints. Of course, there are certain technologies that are mentioned here that could be covering the network and the application of the data layer as well. But specific to endpoint, these are all the product suite that I would have to invest in order to cover CSF compliance. Now that is where it becomes challenging. Now, if you analyze the CSF controls further, there are about 98 controls. Controls are specifically the subcategories that we talked about. And 58 are of technical in nature. So the 58 are automatable, and the rest 40 are process oriented, where the humans have to perform their own assessment and respond to those. So these 58 technical controls is where the automation is possible because they're technical in nature. So in our platform, SanerNow, which I will give a quick introduction in a minute, covers some of these tool sets that are required to achieve compliance. So I marked them in blue. So vulnerability management, patch management, asset threat detection, configuration compliance, and endpoint management are the tool set that are part of the SanerNow platform. And we are also adding more into that tool set. So we are at this point in time working on a file integrity monitoring, which would be part of the seventh tool within the SanerNow framework, and we'll continue to add more and more tools into it. So the objective is to have one single platform that can address all of the CSF requirements, or all of the categories that are there in CSF framework. So these specifically, these are the requirements that we address today with our SanerNow platform. So SanerNow provides continuous visibility to all the IT assets, all the software and hardware inventory, for the granular details about what applications are installed, what is being utilized, or their license violations, or their blacklisted applications, etc. And you can also know what ports are open, services that are running, and have a real-time communication channel with the endpoint systems where you can run a query and get to know who are all logged into a particular system, what processes are currently running, what BIOS version, for example, is there on a particular system, or there hardware changes that have happened recently. So all of these are trackable from the visibility point of view. And then you can also monitor the security health of each of these endpoint system, knowing what antivirus is installed, is it up to date or running, and signature database is current, etc. And have a searching capability to see if any device has a certain sensitive or a confidential information stored at the endpoint level. And the platform also provides a continuous vulnerability assessment. So I say continuous because it performs a daily vulnerability scanning to know what vulnerability is there right now, because newer vulnerabilities are being added into the NIST CVE database on a daily basis. At least about 30 to 40 are getting added. So it's important to run a scan on a daily basis and know exactly what my assets are there, what my assets are, and what vulnerabilities they are exposed to, which could be exploited by the malicious attackers. Then you have patch management. It also helps mitigate these vulnerabilities again on a day-to-day basis. So if there is a vulnerability and a vendor has released a patch, so you have a single console that will allow you to roll out these patches quickly and mitigate the vulnerability before someone exploits it. So the response could be more than merely deploying a patch. It could be about blocking a particular service from running or making certain registry changes or preventing a certain device being connected to a system, etc. So, or even deploying a particular script to apply a certain workaround that is mentioned to mitigate that particular vulnerability. So all of these are possible with patch management tool that we have. Then we have a continuous configuration compliance, all about identifying or hardening the security posture of each of these devices. In default configurations, most devices are exposed to certain configuration weaknesses that could be exploited by the attackers. So we cover all of those and identify the deviations. And at the same time, you have ability to mitigate those deviations to bring the device into the security posture that I would want to achieve. And then you have a threat indicator analysis and incident analysis capability to know if there are certain anomalies or aberrations. And then response capability as well. So the response could be quarantining the device into a particular network or shutting down the system because of an attack, ongoing attack, or killing a network connection, or cleaning up certain DNS cache entries, for example. So it can get to as detailed response possible. I mean, we have array of responses available through our platform to allow you to make these changes. And of course, a reporting tool that will help one report against CSF reporting format. So these are specific controls that we have part of the SanerNow platform. So in each of these categories and the specific subcategories that are covered within the single console that is available through SanerNow. So essentially what SanerNow is trying to do is provide a continuous visibility and ongoing visibility to all the IT assets, perform a risk assessment, and then mitigate those risks identified, and make this an automated continuous process. The risks, visibility, risk assessment, and risk mitigation. All right, so that completes my presentation part. I will do a quick demo of our platform. Shouldn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes, and post that we will look at the questions that are posted so far and respond to all of them. Let me bring up my So SanerNow is a SaaS platform. In terms of deployment, we also have an on-premise deployment capability as well. So I'm going to use our SaaS demo account that we have set up. So one single console, one agent covers about 6 different use cases at this point in time. So SanerNow is a multi-tenant architected platform, which means that you can create multiple sites or client accounts and manage them from a single console. And you have multiple users, and based on the role of each user, so each functionality can be assigned. So a certain level of granular access control is possible as well. So I have 2 sites created in this demo. Site X has about 4 devices, 3 Windows and 1 Linux. We support these 3 family of operating system as of now: Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X. 6 different tools or use cases I mentioned. So we have endpoint management, provides granular visibility to each endpoint activity and allows us to make changes. Asset management provides continuous visibility to all the IT assets. Vulnerability management provides a risk view across all the systems. Then the mitigation part of it through integrated patch management. Then you have a compliance management tool, identifies configuration deviations and helps mitigate those deviations to achieve the compliance. Then we have an endpoint threat detection and response tool that will allow you to identify indicators of attack and respond to those in real time. So those are the 6 tools. So each of these tools have a dashboard of their own. Further details are available in each. So vulnerability management identified about 5,000 plus vulnerabilities on those 4 systems. It also talks about which potential attack could exploit these vulnerabilities that are there, essentially trying to bring the criticality of the need for fixing a particular vulnerability, making it a priority activity. So there are a lot of other parameters that displays on vulnerable assets and devices, what patches are required to mitigate these vulnerabilities. Then we have a patch management tool. Apart from giving out information on how many devices require patching, what applications are requiring patch, and here are the complete list of all the patches that you would have to roll out to achieve 66% compliance. But you can also extend this compliance by selecting more patches and creating a job to fix those vulnerabilities. Further reporting is available as well, but let me quickly show you how to roll out these patches. So you can select any patch that is here and create a job to roll out these patches. The filter criteria is available to do by group and by criticality. The patch management tool can also identify deviations and mitigate those configuration deviations. So the missing configuration can apply the policy changes like password policy or a FIPS compliant encryption algorithm, etc. All of these it can go ahead and remediate. Categorized critical patches separately, so you one-click job you can create. We also track firmwares, the hardware, the drivers that require patching. Certain patches that are installed could be causing the issue in an environment, so you can roll those back. And you can also create an automation rule to create an automated rule that will go ahead and apply these patches on a daily or a particular scheduled basis. We have an asset management tool, provides continuous visibility to all the IT assets, the hardware and the software, and the license management of blacklisted applications, outdated applications, etc. The endpoint management has further granular visibility checks that you can just click on to get instant visibility to all of these. So these are all the open ports, which system, what service or process, all of that data is there. So what is interesting is that you also have the response capabilities mapped to it. So let's say the DNS cache has this particular entry on this system. Now, if you want to do certain changes to that, you have ability to delete and make changes. So the check and the actions are mapped to each other. So these are all pre-built checks that are available. But apart from that, you can also use it to track your network segments, map of different subnets, etc. It'll also track the antivirus products, whether they're installed up to date and running. You can also do a quick search across all the systems to see if there are sensitive data present. Could be a credit card information, for example. You can track the system health, CPU, RAM utilization, disk utilization, etc. So endpoint management also has array of responses or actions that you could perform. So application and device control helps block access to certain devices or applications. Software deployment has list of prepackaged applications that you can roll out across your IT endpoints. Now, the interesting part is that these are all the latest versions, so vulnerability-free versions you can roll out. And you can also uninstall applications if you want certain applications to be removed from a system. You can also package your own application and roll it out across all the IT systems. So array of flexibility there in software deployment. Then you have process control, allows you to start or stop or kill a process, make registry changes. Service control manager to stop or start services, make network settings. And system allows you to reboot or shut down a system, quarantine a file. So there's certain security settings that you can change as well. So that's part of the endpoint management. Then we have compliance management tool that will allow you to create a benchmark based on the templates that we have available for various framework, maybe the guidelines like the NIST compliance or the PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, ISO, etc. So you can create a benchmark. And once you create a benchmark, those deviations will be, a quick scan will be run and deviations will be identified. So specific deviations are all here. This is for the NIST 171. So there are a lot of them which have failed and some rules have passed. So the interesting part is we have a list of remediation actions available as well. So these are all the fixes that you can apply to essentially bring all of these rules to 100% compliance state. So that is the compliance management tool. And finally, the Edr tool allows you to do incident analysis and response. So there are a lot of detection rules that you can build and quickly get a view within a few seconds. So these are all the detection rules you can build. And you also have an array of responses that will allow you to make changes if you find an anomaly as per the detection rule that you have built. So there's an integrated detection and response capability available part of the Edr tool. So these are all the tools that we have. Coming to the reporting, apart from off-the-shelf reports that we have created, you can also custom create your own report. So there are a lot of report APIs available. All of these you can just drag them and drop them onto the dashboard and build your own report. So each of them have a data set like this, which you can alter and modify. You can plot, for example, graphs, or you can filter out certain information that you don't want. So you can build a report like this, save the report and export it into a PDF format. You can also send out an email periodically. So we built one such report for the NIST CSF framework. So individual requirements, categories and subcategories. So this is the NIST CSF report that we have built. So a pretty elaborate one, talking about the individual requirements. This is protection and access control. Talks about which all users have logged in, for example. So this report, you can, again, download it into a PDF or periodically send this report for communicating across the organization. And it's pretty simple and intuitive platform. So once you deploy the agent, within about 5 minutes, you have the risk view across the organization. And then once you log in, you have capabilities to roll out the changes that you would want to achieve, certain level of compliance that you would want to achieve, and then maintain that state over a period of time as a continuous process. Right, with that, I would conclude my demo session.
Thank you, Chandra. I see we have a number of questions.
Okay. All right, so I think some are already answered. So the session will be available. The recording will be available. So we're going to be sharing the recording after this. So there's a question from Alex. What percentage does SanerNow cover for full NIST compliance? So as I mentioned, sorry, with a single platform, we have 6 different tools. So it covers a good number of NIST CSF framework. In terms of percentage, I think we are about 34 or around that total list of controls out of the 58 that we will be able to address with the solution. We are adding the file integrity monitoring tool next month, so that will bring in few more controls into our reporting capability. Another question from Alex: how much does SanerNow cost? So I think we'll connect with you, Alex. So we have certain pricing available for our SaaS platform as well as our on-premise deployment. Post this webinar, we will connect with you over the email and discuss that. Okay, a question from Carl. Is there one master agent that you deploy to all endpoints under management? Yes, so we have one single agent that addresses all of these 6 requirements, and the new requirements that we'll be addressing will also be through the same single agent. So you don't have to deal with multiple agents, which is one of the problem that we are trying to address. Another question from Alex: how long does it take to implement SanerNow? So in terms of deployment, this being a SaaS platform, it's pretty easy to get onboarded. It's only about deploying the agent. So once the agents are deployed, then you have the console that you can start managing. Once the deployment is done, so within about 5 to 10 minutes, you have the risk view and you can start the process. And we also have an on-premise setup, which is also fairly simple and easy. So it is more or less like an appliance that can be deployed on a physical server or a VM and get it onboarded within a couple of hours. So there's a question from Hemnath Sharma. Can we roll out custom software? So if you mean custom software, it's about deploying the software application across your endpoints. Yes, so we do have software deployment capability that will allow you to create a package after uploading your software, and whatever command line parameters that you would want to fine tune, you can create a package and then roll out across all your selected endpoints. There is a question from Carl. Do you replace EDR and vulnerability management packages? To a larger extent, yes. So our focus is primarily the endpoints. So we are not yet covering the network devices. So if you look at Qualys, they do cover the network devices as well. So this is one coverage that we have in the roadmap. But we otherwise, from the endpoint perspective, we do cover a significant vulnerability management. So it can be a replacement for Qualys in that sense. And the CrowdStrike that you mentioned, the CrowdStrike and Carbon Black, etc., are being positioned as a replacement for AV. So they've gone beyond EDR. So in a pure EDR sense, so we do have all the capabilities that are required, but we are not a replacement for antivirus or anti-malware product. So in fact, we have a capability within our platform to track if an antivirus is there and if it is up to date, and so you can manage the antivirus from here. There's a question from Zisla, who sells SanerNow? So SecPod is a brand, the company that owns SanerNow. So we sell, we also have partners across North America and Asia Pacific. So we cover most regions through our reseller partners and distributor partners, and also managed security service partners. All right, so those were the questions that I had. So we'll wait for a minute or so to see if there are more questions from anyone. All right, another question from Hemnath. Are training available for MSP? Yes, so once you sign up as our MSP partner, we do have a training exercise that we take through, and there's a continuous education that will be covered through various training sessions and product update, and all of those will be part of the partner program that we have. Question from Carl again, are your customers mostly SMB or do you have enterprise-sized clients too? So we do have coverage in both SMBs as well as enterprise-sized clients. So the enterprise-sized clients mostly prefer an on-premise, although there is a growing interest in the SaaS platform as well. So we do have both SaaS as well as on-premise. So it covers both the areas. Question from Ernest, please share the new features coming on board. So there are a good number of capabilities that we are working on. One of the immediate release that we are planning to have next month is the file integrity monitoring tool that will be part of our tool set, meant for detecting change detection and prevention of these changes as they occur, essentially to provide system integrity. So certain business critical, security critical controls can be tracked in real time. There are operating system controls that can be tracked apart from files, processes, and certain other operating system controls. So this is one of the major things that we are working on, and we will be, we're planning to release that end of next month. And in parallel, we are also working on the network scanning capability that is planned for Q1 of next year. which will do a risk assessment on the network devices as well. Okay, question from Madhura. Can we have individual reports for each of the 6 tools? Yes, so the reports are available, breakdown per tool. And another thing that I missed mentioning is each of these tools, you can provision it, so you don't have to subscribe to all the tools. So if you're looking at vulnerability management and patch management as the tool set that is required for you, so you can just subscribe and use only those tools. So in that case, the report will be available for those tools. So you can also have a build vulnerability assessment report, for example, which is entirely possible. Question from Robert, can your solution be sold to the government agencies? Yes. In fact, we are SCAP compliant, so most of the federal agencies would want the solution to be SCAP compliant. SCAP is another standard developed by NIST in association with MITRE. SecPod as an organization has been a primary contributor to the development of that, and over the period of last 9 to 10 years, we've been part of that. Our platform, SanerNow as a whole, developed with SCAP suite of standards. So in fact, some of our technology is being used by other vendors in the industry who use our SCAP database. Question from Ernest again, will it be only endpoints? As I said, we are also expanding to the network devices and growing into the mobile space. At this point in time, we do cover desktop laptops and these servers running on Microsoft family of operating systems. Linux, all the distributions are Linux and Mac OS X. What does it involve for a telco or ISP to host and resell? So you have both the options of using our SaaS and reselling that, or you can also host the SanerNow platform within your environment or within the customer environment. So once you become a reseller partner, we talk about these different deployment methodologies and help you with it. Does it come with cost before setup? No, in fact, our SaaS model is pay as you go. So total number of endpoints that you have deployed it on month, we have a billing option available. So there is no upfront cost involved in case you go for a SaaS deployment. Of course, there are annual prices available as well. If you are to go for an on-premise, we have a flexible pricing model. Are there partners providing training in New York? Yes, we do have a couple of partners in that region. We will be able to reach out to you and connect to those partners. So we will connect back with you post this webinar. Question from Carl, do you have a network asset discovery functionality? Yes. So we do have discovery capability, and with the introduction of the network device coverage as well, so we will be expanding that scope to even detect the IP-enabled devices. Do you have an open API for integration with other tools and SOAR? Yes, so we do have REST APIs that you can pull any of the information that you saw on the dashboard. So we have APIs for everything. So you should be able to pull out that information and push it into either a SOAR platform or any other security system that you want to integrate with. All right, those were a good set of questions. Thank you all for asking those. So we will see if there's anything more coming in. Thank you, Gisla. Appreciate that. Thank you, Ernest. Oh, sorry, I had missed out one question from Robert. I think, is there a NAIC number associated with this solution? Yeah, I think we will, our business team will get in touch with you and discuss on that, Robert.
Okay, it looks like we're coming up on the hour here in a few minutes. Are there any other last questions? Again, we thank everybody for attending the webinar and hope you all found it useful.
Thank you, Madhura. I appreciate that. All right, so thanks everyone sitting through this. Really appreciate some of you, coming in early morning to be part of this webinar. Hope you found this useful. Thanks once again from SecPod. Greg?
Okay, we're going to wrap it up now. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks a lot.